Hi, everyone, and welcome to yet another really special Talking Insomnia episode. We have Peggy with us. Welcome.
Oh, thank you. It's good to be here.
Very
Happy
nice
to
having you.
be
And
with
for
you.
those of you who wonder, like, how did this interview come about? It was really you sent me an email, which was a reply to a newsletter sharing a bit of your story, and there was a really powerful part about like you leaving this kind of medical rabbit hole, if you will, medical illness rabbit hole. And I think you have really seen things getting easier as far as insomnia as well. But there may be things we can talk about there that can be helpful for you and the community as well. But that was a little intro. With that said, tell us how you ended up in this sort of medical illness rabbit hole.
Um, so it's hard to say when it all started. It's really vague in my head right now. But I guess we can start with the insomnia because it's kind of how it seemingly all started. So um, I was one of those good sleepers as a kid, even as an adult, and even once I had a child, I not that I was a great sleeper. Nobody is. I mean, this is you can go through tough times and stress, and still there wasn't any insomnia that came with that. And she was born in 2010 and did all of that, and those years were fine. But somehow in 2013, the fall, it seemed like there seemed to be a shift, where I started getting up in the middle of the night. I mean, I would fall asleep. I I would fall asleep, not easily, but somehow would fall asleep watching a video, and then where I once was asleep all night, all of a sudden I started waking up in the middle of the night, and there would be a couple of hours of being up, and then would fall back asleep and wake up in the morning and be tired and have a bad night's sleep. And that kind of continued through 2014, 2015. I just, I didn't think too much about it. I just somehow started waking up in the middle of the night and couldn't fall back asleep. Eventually would, and wake up in the morning tired. And then 2016 was when you said medical issues started. I didn't quite see it. They kind of crept up slowly. So 2016 is when I started having more health
Sorry,
issues.
sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt, Peggy, but during this time from, let's say, 2013 to 2016, you were often waking up, took it quite a long time to fall back asleep. But how worried were you about this, if worried at all?
That's a good question. I wasn't worried. I was annoyed, and I guess I was, stressed. I was all of a sudden thinking to myself, I have insomnia, but oh well, have my coffee in the morning. I didn't do anything about that.
Exactly.
Which, in hindsight, I should have not been worried, but I should have thought, well, okay, something's going on. I'm waking up in the middle of the night. Why is that happening? And I did not do that. I mean, I was just on cruise control.
Yeah, it's kind of paradoxical because on one hand, that probably in one way helped it from becoming more trouble, but on the other hand, you didn't actually learn what was going on. So, but anyway, I want to ask you one more question before you go back to your story. Was during this time when you were up in the night, what did you usually do?
So I was, the brain would start working. So that's the first clue where I would get up in the middle of the night. It wasn't because of food. It wasn't because of, indigestion. It was something. Now in hindsight, there was, stress. There was something in the brain that had developed this, um, autopilot of worry. Or maybe I got up in the middle of the night and then thoughts started happening, and then stress, that's when I started thinking about things. So I got up in the middle of the night, and it was like, worry about this, and this happened, and that, and this stress. So the brain would start working in the middle of the night.
I get
And then I would, have an annoyance with the brain, and eventually somehow I fell back asleep. But yeah, that's what I was doing.
Oh,
I wasn't calm. I wasn't happy about it. That's for sure.
all right. No, thanks for that. Give us a clear picture. And then, yeah, take us to what happened in 2016 then.
So 2016, I started having various health issues, and then in I mean that was escalating. There was different things going on, but the the big health issue that started in September of 2016, which I didn't initially think too much about, but I started having, throughout 2016, I started having some, we'll call them neurological issues. But in the fall of 2016, I suddenly had a weird symptom where I would, lower my head, and then I had these electric shocks, the feeling of shocks happening through my thoracic spine, and then, kind of projecting to my hands. And you know what? Being minded as I'm okay. I didn't really think too much about that, believe it or not. It was my husband and my colleagues at the time were thinking, well, okay, this doesn't sound right. Shouldn't you do something about that? And then I thought, okay, well, I guess I should go see a doctor. So I went to see a
I'm
doctor.
sorry again to interrupt, Peggy, but apart from, you said there were several things going on. What were the other symptoms that you had also at the time?
You mean as far as neurological issues?
Yeah.
I can't think of too many of them, but they slowly crept up. So
All right.
I remember, having some sort of dizziness at some point. I would wake up when I woke up in the middle of the night and, go to the washroom. I just would tilt to one side. And then that kind of went away at some point. But yeah, there were these little things that I didn't think too much about. But that thoracic electric shocks was like the big one in
All right.
September.
So, and then you eventually went to see a doctor. Take us further.
Yeah, so then I went to see a doctor, and that was a stressful time because by the time you start saying there's something wrong, and the doctors would say, okay, well, let's send you for this test or that test. And at some point I was Googling, and I found something that said, this sounds like MS, multiple sclerosis. And then at the time I didn't know what this was about, and the narrative, I don't know what the narrative about multiple sclerosis is like now, but back then it was not a good condition, not a good thing to have. I just so that escalated the stress. And then I would go to the doctors and they would say, no, it doesn't sound like multiple sclerosis. And so this went on September, October, November, back and forth.
And in terms of your symptoms, were they the same, or did you now have more symptoms?
So they were, kind of the same for a while, but then towards the end of November, I suddenly started losing feeling of my body. So it worked its way up and way down to my feet, where I just suddenly, you remember the internet in the 90s, where you would watch something and it would slowly, the bandwidth wasn't great, so the image would slowly creep.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's how my body started feeling. And then eventually, I won't get into the details of how things happened those days, but I ended up getting hospitalized early December because I was losing feeling in my body. And when I was hospitalized, they ran a bunch of tests, including MRIs. And true story, as I was getting ready for an MRI, I hopped on the stretcher. They brought me downstairs to get one done. I actually lost the ability to walk as I got off the stretcher. And not like I fell down. It was just like I stood up, and then my body did not know how to walk. And then I lost the ability to use my hands, and that happened literally as I was waiting for an MRI. But yeah, long story short, that basically, and then there was more things going on. A bunch of things that happened to my body, and then I got diagnosed with multiple sclerosis.
How you
Uh,
were.
yeah.
And if of course, never don't share anything you're not comfortable sharing. But I think it could be about the community to know, like, what if you want to share some of the other things that were happening to your body.
So I mean, with what was going on, I had now lost function of my hands, like fine motor skills. I couldn't use my hands anymore. I had lost the ability to walk. Uh, those were the big ones, but I had lost. Yeah, I couldn't feel my body anymore. Um, and yeah, there were my brain wasn't functioning, anymore. I had brain fog. Like yeah, it's hard to think of them right now, but yeah, I think I mentioned the big ones when I was hospitalized.
And on a practical level, at this point, how are you functioning, getting from A to B? Eating, dressing, taking care of yourselves.
Well, it's not like I couldn't use my hands and I didn't know what was going on. And it actually, like I said, true story, the worst, the the worst of it was when I got hospitalized. So at this point, leading up to it, I was losing function. And then when I was hospitalized is when, you know, I hit rock bottom. Luckily, after that, I mean, there was a course of steroids and, a few days in the hospital. The walking came back pretty quickly. Um, the hands, the fine motor, that took years to come back. But it's not like I couldn't use my hands. It's not like, they were not functioning. It's just I couldn't, use them properly. So I could still use my hands, but I couldn't write. I couldn't. I didn't know how to hold them properly. It was yeah. So
So at this point, thanks for sharing, Peggy. And at this point, you've been hospitalized, you've been told you have MS, you've been put through this third course, and the legs are actually getting a little bit better. You can use your hands, and I'm guessing you're discharged at this point or so. And what happens next?
so it was a tough time. I mean, when you're told you have MS and you ask the doctors, is there anything I can do about it? Am I going to get better? Because at this point, my body was broken. And what they basically said is, well, we don't know. This is not a disease that gets better. It gets progressively worse. You can't really do much about it, but the only thing you can do is take medications. And I'm paraphrasing, but that's kind of the narrative, the message that I got. And here you go and good luck, kind of thing. So yeah, that's how I left the hospital. And because of that, those days they were pretty tough because I had to deal with that. And so there were some dark nights, as they say. But luckily, I quickly got into a mode of, this doesn't make sense. I take medications and that's about it. That doesn't make sense to me. So I started Googling again. Yeah.
And sorry to interrupt, but what part was like, were you questioning? What was it that really didn't make sense to you?
Well, when you're told, we don't know why it happens and it just does. And no, there isn't anything you can do about it, but you can take these medications and hope for the best. That didn't sit well with me because I'm incredibly analytical. Like, I need to understand why. And so that was well, why did this happen to me? And is there anything I can do? This, it was just kind of
It was almost
making
like
it make
the whole
sense.
the story you were told didn't kind of fit with your experiences. You were kind of questioning this whole thing. And yeah, and so you started analyzing this and kind of doing your own research, and yeah, what happens next?
So at some point, instead of, finding stories of, this is what happens with MS, I mean, at the time it was mostly you end up in a wheelchair eventually. I don't know what the narrative is like now, but at the time it was not good. And I just quickly got into a mode of, this is not my story. I mean, I somehow viscerally knew that I'm not sick. And I guess that was the drive to look for stories online of, Googling people who cured their MS, people who reversed whatever it was, just like that kind of search. And I came across stories of people who did just that, and that set me up for more hope than doom. And I found stories of people who reversed their MS, or whatever you want to call it, cure, by doing things like changing their diet. And so I said, okay, let me do that. Let me try that. And I did. Not that I was eating badly, but I just followed the protocols that I found from people who said they reversed their MS, and that quickly made me feel better. So it was the beginning of, oh, okay, well, there's something to this. And then since then, you know, I was able to say, okay, yeah, it's not medications, it's more than that. So it started with diet, and things started reversing. I started feeling better, even symptoms. There were more things that I did, but yeah, it started with the diet. So then more than anything, it wasn't the diet, it was the change from, being in a place of despair to hope, that changed it. But in hindsight, I was going about it though from a place of fear. I mean, which served me. I mean, it's not a good place to do things, but it served me. I was scared, and I made things happen. But that fear. So as far as like going back to the insomnia, um, I was getting physically better, but anxiety started getting worse. And that's because I was stuck in a place of fear. I mean, rightfully so. It's not an easy thing to navigate, but I was functioning from a place of fear, to get myself not to break, not to, like, and so because of that, anxiety got worse, and then insomnia actually got worse. So I was getting better, but then, come summer of 2017, it was pretty bad. I was sleeping 1 to 2 hours a night sometimes. Yeah, I was anxiety was through the roof. Insomnia was pretty bad.
And was the anxiety at this point centered around sleep or not sleeping?
The anxiety was centered, well, it probably, I guess it's like a glass that fills. So, the fear of what will happen to me, physically, just, made me fill that glass. And then the body couldn't handle, the nervous system couldn't handle it anymore. um, it was not sleep per se. It was something else. But now I was super anxious,
I see.
in some ways more than before.
And again, like you were super anxious. And the thoughts there, was it like, you know, were you very anxious that if I don't sleep enough, this will happen to my body, or was it just you were anxious about other things and that then kept you awake? Or was this, again, was the anxiety kind of around sleep or related to sleep, or not really?
That's a good question. I mean, initially, and it wasn't cognitive. I wasn't thinking, well, I'm scared of like of sleep, or I'm scared of, but I was scared of breaking. I was scared
Mm,
of what would happen to me. And knowing that you need to eat well, sleep well, do all these things in order to be healthy, then sleep went into that equation. So the fact that I wasn't able to sleep was, scaring me even more, because that would make me, you know, that would make me break more quickly. So yeah, the fear of not sleeping was just thrown in the pot, I guess.
yeah, absolutely. And by the way, just a very little quick little side note here. Sometimes, our emotions are so strong that we don't even know exactly what we're thinking, and looking back, we can be so, the emotion takes so much space that we're not really cognizant of what thoughts are going on. So it's not strange that you can't remember exactly what you were thinking when there was like a very intense period like that. But yeah, so now, you're having a real struggle at night, and what happens next?
Um, so at this point, I was trying to find solutions to sleep. I mean, it was with I was always like, since early 2017, I was looking for ways to, heal from MS, and heal from anxiety, and heal from sleep, and all these things. But um, yeah, I had gotten so anxious at some point. I did end up going on SSRIs, um, which kind of helped. They did help sleep for that period, but I did not want to continue. I didn't, like, with my mindset, I didn't think this was the solution, but I was so anxious that, I kind of had to take that life jacket. So I took SSRIs for 6 months. I came off of them in early 2018. And so I was sleeping okay-ish while I was taking them. So I guess it makes sense, because you're starting to be a little bit more calm. Um, and then I stopped them, and eventually that crept up again. But it wasn't as bad as before. Like, I was way better, but it did creep up. And once I got off the SSRIs, obviously the brain was thinking, well, you got to find that natural, approach, that natural thing that will, fix the sleep. Um, so I was doing all sorts of things. You know, um, eating a certain way, taking, the supplements, the usual things, trying to find the what specifically helps sleep. So yeah, I guess I had gotten to a point where all of a sudden sleep consumed. It became that one thing. I was dealing with well, I was fixing the other stuff, but now sleep became like, if I can only fix my sleep, things will be good. I wasn't thinking that, but I can see in hindsight that the nervous system was kind of primed that way. And I think I mentioned it to you, in my email. So what was interesting was, when it came to MS, which is a big thing, I was primed as a, you know I'm not sick. It's all good. This was not conscious. But somewhere deep down, I knew this is not my narrative. This is not my story. I'm not sick. So I somehow, was able to start reversing that. But with insomnia, so it's interesting. I thought about this way for when it came to MS, but then insomnia, it was like, well, if I can only fix this insomnia, then I will be okay. So I eventually realized, oh, so I'm somehow seeing insomnia as the problem, and I'm chasing that one thing rather than just, you know have a general wellness approach. But yes, I became obsessed with that. I looked at all things, insomnia, what habits, what supplements, what food, and and I was able to help myself, but in the process, I made my day to day very regimented. I, like I had, well, the earplugs I've had for a while, but the blue blocking glasses, and going to bed at a certain time, and you know taking my specific supplements, and waking up a certain time, and and all the stuff, which was good. I mean, I'm not saying having a healthy lifestyle isn't important, but I had made my world pretty small. It was all revolving around if I can sleep. So my day to day was all about how am I going to make sure that I will be sleeping properly. Yeah.
Well, yeah, thanks for sharing that. And one question at this point, the neurological symptoms, are they still affecting you a lot, or are they already kind of almost in the background now?
So the neurological symptoms, ever since that, gloomy 2016 December, it was like as if that was rock bottom. And since then, they were getting better, just continuously getting better.
Very nice. And the medications you were told to take, I'm guessing at some point you stopped taking them for MS, or what happened with those?
Yeah, so I was on those, for a good 2 years, but I eventually thought, well, I'm doing okay, and I'm eating well. I have good habits. I trust that I will be okay without them, because the fear that I had was, well, these are immune suppressing medications. Sure, that they can stop me from having an attack in the future, but they're also putting me at risk for other issues. So I decided to stop them. Yeah, and
And did you do that? Did you do that in discussion with your doctor, or did you just kind of do it yourself?
well, that's unfortunately, when it comes to doctors with MS, neurologists, I'm hoping that it has changed now, but um, they were just trained to treat conditions like MS with medication. So when I told my doctor, well, how about I give it a try and not take them, he basically said, okay, goodbye. And yeah, and if anything happens, you come see me after that.
Okay. Well, I'm glad. I guess nothing happened, and you're doing well. So I'm glad about that, of course. But there's some tricky situations in the medical system isn't really equipped for a lot of what we struggle with today. So I'll just leave it there. But okay, so back to the insomnia. Now it sounds like more of the common insomnia story we hear, where we have the rituals, the supplements, we regiment the day to try to make sure we sleep, etc. And from then on, I guess at some point you found our YouTube channel, our teachings here, but what's kind of the next evolution when it comes to the insomnia?
So there wasn't one day I was not sleeping and the next I was. It just kind of gradually got better. But my obsessive, all things wellness self kept Googling, finding YouTube videos about stress, about anxiety, about insomnia, about all that good stuff. And then I came across your channel, probably a little over a year ago. I can't remember exactly. And I started watching your videos. And I just remember, I mean, at this point, I was actually like you asked me if how was the insomnia? It had gotten to be okay. I just didn't believe it. you know what I mean? And maybe other people have a similar kind of story. It's like, you know, you're okay or okay-ish, but you just don't believe it, or you're waiting for the other shoe to drop. You're just not in that space. So I was sleeping okay-ish. I can't say I was, you know, a magnificent sleeper, but I was okay. But I would still obsess about, okay, let's try to fix this insomnia. So that mindset was still there, which is why when I found your videos and you know, you were saying essentially there's nothing to fix. You when you fall asleep, this is something that should happen naturally. Then that kind of seeped in, and my nervous system was like, oh, yes, yes, that makes sense. I get that. In
And
fact,
did you? Yeah.
I remember there was a specific video, which is what, like, I don't know what happened, but there was a video and you mentioned that, you know, when healthy people sleep and then they wake up in the middle of the night with a noise, some noise, and they just kind of open their eyes. I think you used the analogy of an animal, a dog waking up in the middle of the night, and you know, oh, there was a noise, and then, oh, that's fine. It's just something dropped, and you know, go back to sleep. Watching that video somehow just kind of something clicked. It was like, ah, yes, here is my issue. That's
Yeah.
just it.
That's really nice. And just for so the audience knows that I often use that type of analogy where like humans and animals too, they will be sleeping, right? And then there's some noise, and then we naturally wake up because our brain is kind of wants to keep us safe, right? So because what was that? Are we safe? And then we're like, oh yeah, we're safe. And then we fall back asleep, and then we don't remember it actually. So we all wake up many times per night, but we don't remember it. But the difference is, of course, when our brain has started to think that like not sleeping is a threat. Then we wake up and they're like, what's happening? Oh, I'm awake. That's a threat. I got to be ready for it. And then we stay awake. So
Exactly, exactly. So that was my issue, and it just kind of resonated because it wasn't just sleep, it was health, it was everything. I was suddenly, well, suddenly, I was now in this constant hypervigilant mode, and that is what you know contributed to me waking up and not being able to fall back asleep. So that was super, super helpful.
and let me ask you this question again, like not to put you on the spot or anything, like you answer, of course, however you feel you want to answer this question. But if I would say that, you know, this hyperarousal that puts us in kind of a like a hypervigilant state, it can, you know, our nervous system is like really kind of on a higher level, like it working more, etc. So something like a kind of electric shock, or like feeling a tingling, that maybe everybody would feel something like that, but when we're hyperaroused, we really feel it strongly. Could you do, in your mind, could you see that like the kind of like nodding your head and feeling a electric shock or something like that could be related to hyperarousal? Have you thought along those lines?
Um, so the electric shocks, in my experience, that was um, because I was set up in a not really paying attention to my body. I almost um, didn't see the importance. And well, you know, I thought my brain thought it's not a sledgehammer, you know, hurting my hand. It's just some electric shocks. So I minimize them. But as far as sleep goes, you know, it did affect my sleep. You know, I would be in bed and nod my head, and that would wake me up. So naturally, that was an issue. But it was what interrupted my sleep. It was not, you know, as
Yeah, it's a sleep disruption, not something that in itself called insomnia. Yeah, very well said. And all right, so you're learning now. You're seeing things from a different perspective, and then you know, I'm guessing like sleep started happening a little easier, or what happened next?
So you mean after?
Oh, you found like our channel, and you started kind of tuning in and learning.
Yeah, I started even, you know, applying some of the things that um, I thought would be kind of leaving the habits behind. I can't say like I've left too much behind. I still wear earplugs. I still like my blackout curtains. But I remember, and this really changed a lot, was when I went to bed. I used to need something of a watching a video or listening to something in order to fall asleep. And then finding you gave me the courage to say, well, let me try to just, you know what, go to bed and see what happens. And there was a night I did that, and I was able to fall asleep without watching or listening to anything. And then that stuck. And since then, I no longer need to watch anything. I actually enjoy going to bed. So falling asleep, which used to even as a child used to be difficult. I was always the one who was, had a hard time falling asleep, but once I fell asleep, I was okay. Um, Now I'm back to where I was as a kid. I just go to bed, close my eyes, enjoy that. I actually enjoy being in bed and just, meditate or just,
It's
enjoy,
warm. Yeah, it's like nice. Yeah.
yeah, being cozy. And I don't know, it may take me 5 minutes to fall asleep. It may take me 15, maybe take me 40 minutes. I don't know. But at some point I fall asleep fast enough, and it's just wonderful. I just enjoy falling asleep.
That's amazing. I'm so glad to hear that. And just to point out something really quickly to the community here is like you don't actually know how long it takes often. You just know that it's not the struggle. You kind of lay there, you're cozy, and it's, so it's so nice because a lot of people are like, how fast do you fall asleep? And it's like when we don't pay attention to that, it just happens easier.
Yeah, that's what definitely helped me see and work towards, which is really important.
Yeah, I'm so glad. This made so much sense and it's helped you. And with that said, I think I said in the email that we could, like, your story has been extremely valuable because you talked about topics that we've never really talked about before. But there's also an element of like you're maybe not like the insomnia may not be kind of 100% completely in the rearview mirror. You're still having some kind of fears and anxieties around this. So I thought, we could do a little bit of coaching here too, and hopefully it will be valuable to you and the community as well. But so I'm kind of turning it over to you. Like, do you have any kind of questions for me or things that are difficult for you now or anything like that?
So difficult when it comes to sleep, I wouldn't say, I even minimize, like, it's not difficult anymore. I have some good nights, some not, like a little bit, but I know that, I can correlate, well, this has been a stressful day, or I did too much here, and then that affected my sleep. I still wake up in the middle of the night, and I'm more able to fall back asleep. But I still have these waking up in the middle of the night. I guess a question for you would be, is it possible to not to happen? Or, I mean, right now I'm feeling that it's okay. I wake up and I can fall back asleep. Is it possible to not wake up at all? Do you know a lot of people who, especially older people, because when you're, a child, you can sleep more easily, but the older we get, I guess there's more interruptions. But is it possible to actually fall asleep? Or in your experience, have you seen people fall asleep and not wake up in the middle of the night?
No, that's a nice question, and you already sort of answered it for me. So I would say this, that from personal experience, I'm 44 now, and it's extremely rare, I would say, that I don't wake up at all. And I think after a certain age, I don't know what that is. Maybe for some it's 35 to 40 years. After a certain age, I just think very rarely do we just sleep through the night. Can it still happen? I think, there can be this outlier when we, maybe we were really tired and, something like when we do sleep through the night. But I think those become outliers after a certain age, So I think to me, I always say this. I think that becomes outliers. That's kind of normal with age, that we just start waking up, but it doesn't need to be a struggle. We can wake up and then we're kind of awake for a bit and then we fall back asleep without any struggle. So I would say anybody, regardless of age, can have like struggle-free sleep. That makes sense.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, because there is part of me that, there's like, well, could this not happen? Can I just fall asleep and stay asleep? And and the other voice says, well, not necessarily, but the shift, what really has changed in me is that I could wake up and use the bathroom and come back to bed, and somehow I fall back asleep again. So there's that loss of fear that's dissipating, and that's been really great.
That's wonderful. And I have very little to add, except that when that fear starts dissipating, then sleep becomes struggle. Like the struggle, it goes away. And when there's sort of like, sometimes I hear someone say, "Hey Daniel, like I've gotten to this place, but how do I get to the next place?" Which is a little tricky, because then as long as we're trying to get to the next step, we probably have some struggle, versus somebody who says, "Hey Daniel, I've gotten to this place and it's okay. I don't necessarily need to push myself to get to the next place, whatever that is." That for that person, it's going to be a little easier, So just sharing that.
You can probably see that from my question, where you thought, well, she's kind of looking for that next the next place. But yeah, I guess my next place would be, like I said, I sleep okay, for the most part. Wake up rested, and my days are fine. So I sleep in a way better than I have in many, many, many years before all of this happened. Um, my body's functioning better. I have energy during the day, all of that. But like I said, my world has become a little bit more small. The habits around um, bedtime and that kind of routine is there. So it would be nice. I guess that would be my challenge, to work towards losing the fear around that. Like, there's less and less of that, but I don't know if it's resistance. It's me, the subconscious, saying, well, no, like I don't want to give up the earplugs or the blackout curtains. There must be a little bit of resistance, but it would be nice to be able to be tired and just fall asleep without earplugs, without blackout, and being able to fall asleep anywhere. So that would be the next step.
Yeah. And I would say, my thoughts when I hear this is like, you're part of me wants to say you're already on the way there. You're already seeing kind of the fear is gradually dissipating, and at some point, without doing anything more, you will have a random day where you're like, "Whoa, I forgot to put on my earplugs," or it'll just naturally become less and less important. So that's part of me wants to just say that, but part of me is kind of like Coach Daniel. I'm like, but no, we have to go deeper into this and talk more about this. So that part of me says, to me, this is a story of like a lot of enlightenment, and a lot of like really like amazing hard work and willingness to learn has led you to a place where things are much easier, which is wonderful. But the brain is this, it's a safety machine. It's a survival machine. The truth, which is that thanks to letting go and not trying so much, things gotten easier. It's kind of scary for the brain, because it wants to have control. It wants to know, right? So then I think part of the brain often holds on to like, okay, things are easier, but maybe it is thanks to the earplugs. Maybe it's thanks to the blackout curtain. Maybe it's best not to shake the orthopods. Maybe, maybe let's take it. And that's so natural. But basically, when we can start kind of maybe questioning that, or seeing like, or just seeing that it's really not that, like, because if it was about the earplugs, like, then people could just put earplugs and sleep. It's not about that. It's about our emotions, and just kind of, I would say gently maybe questioning that, or when we feel like it, we can, be courageous and see like, maybe I don't need to use it. But I think like gently working ourselves towards seeing that we don't actually need any safety, and sleep always is natural. Like, that leads us where we want to be. Something like that comes to mind. But does it make sense, Peggy?
It does, and in fact, it's the word gently, because some of us, like a lot of people who struggle with anxiety, there is an inner critic. There is a um, a lot of people who say I need to fix my sleep, or I'm doing something wrong. There is that inner critic, and those people, myself included, need to understand that yeah, there's no no pressure on yourself, just gently. And yeah, I mean, I don't need to get rid of my earplugs. I could, but yeah, I mean, that's how the falling asleep happened. It was just I just decided to try it at some point, and the nervous system saw, hey, this is great. Yeah, I'm actually enjoying this. And then that became a habit. So making that, the other things a habit, I guess.
Yeah, well, I would say almost like, it wasn't like you were like, oh, I'm listening to some music or something to sleep, and now I have to stop that. I have to stop myself from doing that. It wasn't like that, right? It just kind of naturally happened that one day you were like, maybe not. And I think it's the same things. These other kind of little sleep efforts fade away. It's not like we need to push ourselves to do it. Like they naturally fade away.
Yeah, in fact, it was interesting that is that one, like that one night where I just kind of decided, oh, I'm not going to listen to anything or watch anything. I remembered somehow the memory of me being probably an 8-year-old, and back then we didn't have anything to fall asleep to. We didn't have um, iPads, or we went to bed and fell asleep, right? And I just had this memory of me being in bed and having some sort of story in my mind. I was playing with certain characters that were in the bed, and I had formed a tent. I went back to childhood, like to that age, and I just remembered that, and it was comforting, and it helped me fall asleep that night. Just having this imagination, this story about what was going on before bed as an 8-year-old.
Exactly.
And after that, it just kind of happened 1 or 2 days, and then it became a habit. Like, okay, now I'm enjoying. I'm going to bed, and I'm just gonna fall asleep. So yeah.
No, that's just so nice to hear. I remember that too from when I was a kid. Like you just go, yeah, you go all kinds of places in your imagination. It was like you almost look, you almost often look forward to going to bed because you could just let your imagination run and go places, right? Yeah.
That's exactly it. It's exactly what, you help me help me get to, like, just looking forward to going to bed. I'm sure a lot of people who've come through the program, or you've spoken to, said they once enjoyed sleeping and they'd like to go back to that, and then there's this kind of disconnect, right? Like I enjoyed sleeping, and I need to get back to that. But the the beautiful part is when you can say, I enjoyed falling asleep, and I'm enjoying falling asleep, and not beating yourself up and putting so much pressure on doing that. And that's where I am right now.
That's amazing. And you brought up something very nicely, which is like anything that we enjoy in life happened because we were simply enjoying it, right? We never forced ourselves to enjoy anything, Like eating ice cream. If someone said like, you have to enjoy eating this ice cream, then we'd be like, oh, this is no fun. We just enjoy it, right? So you point that out so nicely. Very, very well. Well, I will, just actually want to thank you. This was really, really valuable for the community, and it was really nice hearing your story. And I'll just say, be in touch, Peggy, and thanks for being here today.
No, thank you, Daniel. It was really nice chatting with you.
Anytime. Okay. Bye, everyone.